So reading from Hebrews chapter 7. This Melchizedek was king of Salem and priest of God Most High. He met Abraham returning from the defeat of the kings and blessed him, and Abraham gave him 1/10 of everything. First, his name means king of righteousness, then also king of Salem means king of peace. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, like the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Just think how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him 1/10 of the plunder. Now the law requires the descendants of Levi to become priests to collect 1/10 from the people, that is, their brothers, even though their brothers are descended from Abraham. This man, however, did not trace his descent from Levi. Yet he collected 1/10 from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. Without doubt, the lesser person is blessed by the greater. In one case, the 1/10 is collected by men who die, but in the other case by him who is declared to be living. One might even say that Levi, who collects the 1/10, paid the 1/10 through Abraham, because when Melchizedek met Abraham, Levi was still in the body of his ancestor. If perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of it the law was given to the people, why was there still need for another priest to come, one in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Aaron? For when there is a change of priesthood, there must also be a change of law. He of whom these things are said belonged to a different tribe, and no one from that tribe has ever served at the altar. For it is clear that our Lord descended from Judah, and in regard to that tribe Moses said nothing about priests. And what we have said is even more clear if another priest like Melchizedek appears, one who has become a priest not on the basis of a regulation as to his ancestry, but on the basis of the power of an indestructible life. For it is declared, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." The former regulation is set aside because it was weak and useless, for the law made nothing perfect, and a better hope is introduced by which we draw near to God. And it was not without an oath. Others became priests without an oath, but he became a priest with an oath when God said to him, "The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever." Because of this oath, Jesus has become the guarantee of a better covenant. Now, there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office. But because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Such a high priest meets our need, one who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests men who are weak, but the oath which came after the law appointed the Son who has been made perfect forever. Today, a complicated passage, but one that is core, particularly to the Jewish Christians who were thinking of going back to Judaism. Today we meet this guy called Melchizedek. We've met him briefly in the last couple of sessions, and he appears first of all back in Genesis chapter 14 verses 17 to 18, and then he pops up again in Psalm 110, and then now in the letter to the Hebrews. Now, all we know about him comes from Genesis chapter 14. He is the king of Salem, the city of peace, and he brings out bread and wine to Abraham, the patriarch of Judaism, the person they all respect, they revere as their greatest leader. he brings this bread and wine out to Abraham after Abraham had won a stunning victory. And we're told Melchizedek was a priest of God Most High. Melchizedek blesses Abraham, and Abraham responds by giving a tenth of the spoils of war to acknowledge God's help in winning the battle. End of story. We don't see Melchizedek again till Psalm 110 verse 4, quoted here in Hebrews. And that's where King David, is talking about the Messiah and saying that he would be a priest in the order of Melchizedek. And so now the writer of Hebrews uses Melchizedek as an illustration to show just how great Jesus is and draws some parallels between the two. So first of all, Melchizedek was a king and priest, verse 1. Now, those two things didn't usually go together in Israel. You had to be a descendant of David to be king, a descendant of Aaron to be a priest. And Melchizedek shows how you can be both. Melchizedek, like Jesus, is King of Kings and our priest. The only two times in the Bible that occurs. Then you get the name Melchizedek. The name Melchizedek means king of righteousness. You'll remember he's the king of Salem, the king of peace. So just like Jesus, Melchizedek represents both righteousness and peace. And then the third thing we find is that Melchizedek's priesthood is not based on the line of descent. Now, again, a priest in Israel was supposed to come from the tribe of Levi. But there's no record of Melchizedek's descent. There's also no record of Melchizedek's priesthood ending, although it must have. Jesus, the great high priest, wasn't a descendant of Levi. He was a descendant from Judah. And we also know that Jesus has a never-ending priesthood. Now, verses 4 to 14, the writer's showing that Melchizedek, the priest, the King of Kings, is superior to Abraham and to Jewish priesthood. He shows this by reminding his readers that Abraham gave a tithe to Melchizedek. The lesser honoured the greater. So Melchizedek is greater than Abraham. Now, since Abraham acknowledges the superiority of Melchizedek by giving him a tithe, we read that all of Abraham's descendants paid tribute as well. So the Jewish people, the priests, the Levites, pay tribute through Abraham to Melchizedek. Then we see Melchizedek blessed Abraham. The superior blesses the inferior. Then we get this thing of David in Psalm 110. David is looking for someone different. He's saying in that psalm, the old way of doing things, it's failed. It's been continuously repeated, king after king after king, and it hasn't worked. And that's what we saw when we were looking through 1 and 2 Kings, through Amos, Hosea. It failed. We need something different. And this new priesthood, David is saying, isn't about who you're related to, and it's going to be indestructible because it has conquered death. And so this chapter of Hebrews is trying to make the point to the Jewish hearers, readers, that Jesus is a superior high priest. He's superior to Melchizedek. Melchizedek was superior to Abraham, and the whole of Judaism, the Jewish priesthood, through Abraham, pay tribute to Melchizedek, who in turn has one greater than him. So how is Jesus superior? Well, verse 17, Jesus was appointed by God. Verse 21, Jesus was made a priest forever. Verse 22, Jesus brought a better covenant. Covenant is that agreement that was made between God and Abraham, and then a new covenant through Jesus. And this is a better covenant, a better agreement, if you like, between God and man. Because this new covenant is not about what we do, but it's about what Jesus has done for us. It's not about living good enough lives, which is a key point of Judaism, but it's about trusting in Jesus. It's not about offering sacrifices, but about trusting the once and for all sacrifice. Then Jesus is superior to the priesthood because Jesus lives forever. And that should be an amazingly comforting point for us. It means Jesus is consistent, he's ever present. He will always be our high priest. And you read at the end of the reading, he's always interceding, praying for us. Jump down to verse 27. We read Jesus, this new high priest, the one greater than Melchizedek, is holy rather than sinful. You see, the priest in the Old Testament, in Judaism, they had to offer sacrifices for their own sin first. And then they'd go on and offer sacrifices for everybody else. But these priests, they had the same problem as us. And so their effectiveness, their work was limited because they too were sinful. Of course, Jesus didn't have that problem. He was holy and perfect, paying for our sin, not his own, when he died on the cross. Then also verse 27 we see about Jesus, that Jesus' sacrifice need never be repeated. You see, Jesus offered himself, not animals. Jesus was sinless. The priests are sinful. He offered his sacrifice voluntarily. The priests did what the law told them to do. But the animal's sacrifice was only a temporary fix. So the next day you'd have to repeat it all. But Jesus paid for anything, past, present, future. The priests had to repeat day after day Jesus' sacrifice once for all, forever, past, present, future. So Jesus finished the job. His work will never lose value. His work will never fade in significance. His work will never run out of power. So the writer to the Hebrews is reminding these people, listen, Melchizedek was greater than Abraham, who you revere. Jesus greater than Melchizedek. Jesus greater than the priesthood. So don't go back to it. You've got one greater. Now for us, I hope we don't put our trust in priests and animal sacrifices. But there is a danger for all of us that we too may revert back to things that we think might save us, that we want to save us. That might be our own good deeds. It could be Our religious formulas. If we receive the Eucharist or communion often enough, we'll be saved. Let's go back to that. It may be our own experiences, our friendships, our sacrifices, the things that we give up for God. You see, it's a complicated reading perhaps, but actually its message is really simple. Jesus is sufficient. Don't go back to things that you may want to save you. Jesus is sufficient.